The race for Élysée has turned into an absolute soap opera. One of the good ones. The star of the show, you know her well, Marine Le Pen. She's been trying to lead France for over a decade. But a few months ago, she took a hit that seemed final. A court convicted her and banned her from running in the April 2027 presidential election. In other words, she was disqualified. Out of the race. End of story. Or at least that's how it looked. Because just a few weeks ago, an unexpected twist changed everything.
Le Pen launches presidential campaign in a twist for French politics. The day after a court decided the far-right leader Marine Le Pen could run for office again, cheers and boos met her campaign kickoff in a rural stronghold.
And where's the problem? Well, her own party had already moved on. It already had the replacement lined up. We're talking about Jordan Bardella, a 30-year-old who, according to every poll, was on track to become France's next president. In fact, get this. In the polls, Bardella was even outperforming Le Pen herself. He beat every possible rival in the second round, and by wider margins than she did. And that, which might sound like a minor detail, is everything in France. Because there, the president is decided in a second round, fought head-to-head, one-on-one, no holds barred. And in a race like that, every single percentage point can be the difference between walking into the Élysée or being left at the door again. So all of a sudden, the Rassemblement National, the national rally, finds itself with two candidates for a single ticket to the Élysée. And for now, though nobody's ruling out a last-minute surprise, everything points to Le Pen being the one to run. On the surface, it's all unity, but underneath, it's a very different story. The tension there is thick enough to cut with a knife, because we're talking about politics. French politics. Here, internal rivalry and the fight for power couldn't be more obvious. And it's worth noting, this has already happened once before in this very party, and it didn't end well at all. Just remember Florian Philpott, Marine Le Pen's right-hand man, and the brains behind her strategy, who clashed with her in 2017 after the election defeat, stormed out to form his own party, and vanished from the political map. So the questions write themselves. Will the Rassemblement National finally win the presidency, or will it slip away again at the last moment? And if they win, will it be Le Pen who reaches the Élysée, or will Bardella end up snatching the throne from her? And above all, how might this whole war affect France's future? Well, that's exactly what we're covering today, so let's get started. But first, if you're interested in the world of investing, if you want to learn how to manage your savings, protect yourself against inflation, and figure out how to make money beyond your day job, I've got some news for you. Here at Visual Factory, we've created the Visual Factory Club, a newsletter where every week we send out free content focused on essential financial education, the ABC of what everyone should know to understand the stock market, financial markets in general, investment platforms, how to assess investment opportunities, and which markets may have more or less potential. Because of course, if you want to invest your money so you're not at the mercy of your country's economic instability, you at least need to understand the basics of the financial world. In the Visual Factory Club, you'll learn all of this completely free of charge. Through the link below and this QR code, you can sign up for the club and start receiving the upcoming editions. What's more, when you sign up, you'll receive a dossier where I explain in a clear and simple way the most essential investment concepts. What multiples or the PE ratio are, what indices are, ETFs, derivatives, funds, EPS, you get the idea. After that, every week you'll receive additional materials and market analysis to help you stay informed about what's going on. And by the way, the sooner you sign up, the better. Since we send each episode of the series by email, and every edition is unique, if you're not subscribed, you might miss some of them, and you won't be able to access them later. But with that said, let's get into the video. To understand today's mess, the first thing we need to do is rewind. Why was Le Pen out of the race in the first place? Basically, money. More specifically, European Parliament money. Let me break it down for you, because it's simpler than it looks. Every MEP receives EU funds to pay their assistants, the people who help them with their work in Brussels and Strasbourg. And the rule is crystal clear. That money is for parliamentary work, nothing else. And yet, for over a decade, Le Pen's party blatantly ignored that rule. On paper, those assistants worked for the MEPs. In practice, many of them worked for the party back in France. The result? Brussels ended up footing the bill for a good chunk of the party's political machine. And we're not talking pocket change. The courts calculated the impact at nearly €3 million in fraud. So in March 2025, the bill came, and it was brutal. The Paris court found Le Pen, her party, and more than 20 people in her circle guilty of embezzlement. She personally got 4 years in prison, a €100,000 fine, and a 5-year ban from holding office. But here's the key detail. That ban came with a devastating condition, what the French call provisional execution. What does that mean? That it applied immediately without waiting for any appeals. In other words, from that very day, Le Pen was out of the 2027 presidential race. So how did she get back in the game? That's where an appeals court ruling comes in, this past July 2026. Now pay attention, the appeals court confirmed she was still guilty. That part didn't change, but it softened the punishment, cutting the ban from 5 years down to 45 months, and 30 of those months were suspended. Translation, 15 months of an actual enforceable ban. 15 months that started counting from the first conviction back in March 2025. So you can do the maths yourselves. By July 2026, that period had already passed. In other words, Le Pen had served her ban almost without noticing, and suddenly she was free to run again. But of course, here's the thing, the party hadn't just been sitting still this whole time, far from it. While Le Pen was fighting it out in court, the man set to become RN's next leader had already taken the throne, and he was getting very, very comfortable in it. One day, Jordan Bardella woke up and realized power was within his reach. And it wasn't wishful thinking. As we've seen, every poll had him winning, and by a solid margin. But how is this even possible? How does a 30-year-old kid who's never governed anything manage to connect with voters better than Le Pen herself, who's led the party for 15 years? Well, for several reasons, and they all matter. The first is the most obvious. Bardella's last name isn't Le Pen, and for half of France, that surname is pure poison. It drags along the shadow of Jean-Marie Le Pen, Marine's father, and the party's founder, infamous for his racist and anti-Semitic remarks. Bardella, on the other hand, arrives clean of all that baggage. He also has a profile that breaks the mold. His mother is an Italian immigrant. He grew up in a working-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Paris, and today he's a genuine social media star with over 2 million followers on TikTok alone. And then there's the tone. Bardella sounds less like the old-school far right and more like a serious governing alternative.
On economics, Bardella positions himself as much more liberal than Le Pen. He's pushing for tax cuts, less red tape, and improving the country's fiscal competitiveness. He's clearly aiming to project stability and win over businesses and employers. It's a stance that moves away from Le Pen's more statist, interventionist rhetoric, which has traditionally been geared toward working-class voters. Something similar happens with the European Union. Le Pen has spent years championing hardline sovereignism against Brussels, while Bardella prefers to transform the union from within.
In fact, Bardella has dared to touch one of the party's most sacred promises, restoring the retirement age of 62. And he's even gone further, floating the idea of scrapping a fixed retirement age altogether and building a new system based on each person's years of contributions. To sum it up, Le Pen is basically a French Orban, and Bardella is more of a Meloni. And in France, that difference could be worth an entire Élysée, especially now, with the 2027 election shaping up to be incredibly tight. Look at this. On betting markets like Polymarket, Le Pen is in the lead, but only barely. Right on her heels is centrist Edouard Philippe. The feeling is that any small detail could tip the scales. Even more so given the French system where the winner comes out of a second round, head-to-head runoff. And there's an unwritten rule. Whenever the far right makes it to that second round, every other party, left and right alike, bands together to block their path. They call it the Republican Front, a cordon sanitaire against the Le Pen name. And has it worked? Oh, it's worked all right. Picture the scene. 2002, Jean-Marie Le Pen makes it to the second round, and the whole country takes to the streets to stop him. The result? A measly 18%. 15 years later, it's Marine's turn. In 2017, the wall holds her to 34%. Then 2022 comes along and she's already pushing 41%. See what's happening? The wall's still standing, with more and more cracks in it, but it's still standing. And that's where Bardella changes everything. The less scary you seem, the fewer people show up to block you. And obviously, a young guy, more moderate, without the cursed surname, scares a lot fewer people than Le Pen does. So with that image, and the whole party pushing behind him, Bardella didn't wait around. He started drafting a platform, putting together a future government, and even making official visits abroad.
France's far-right leader, Jordan Bardella, tours Poland in search for new allies.
Basically, Bardella already saw himself as president. He could already smell power. But then, bam! As we've just told you, the story suddenly did a complete 180. And no matter how much better he polls, the party's candidate is going to be Marine Le Pen. But VisualPolitik community, before we tell you how they plan to play this card, quick favour, if you're enjoying the video, hit like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It takes you a second and it helps us out a ton. That said, let's keep on going. Now, Le Pen running doesn't mean Bardella disappears. Far from it. He obviously still carries enormous weight within the party, and instead of hiding that weight, they're going to try to squeeze every last drop out of it during the campaign. Deep down, Le Pen and Bardella are two different magnets. Each one attracts a different slice of the French electorate. Separately, each one covers a flank, but together they cover a big chunk of the political board. And that's exactly the idea they are working with now. Look at how clever this move is. Instead of choosing between one or the other, the party is going to campaign as if both of them were running at once. It's what people in France are already calling the binôme, the duo. Le Pen and Bardella shoulder to shoulder, selling themselves as a package deal. Le Pen herself put it plainly.
It's the signal that we're entering the campaign together. We're offering the French people a duo with real solidity.
So how does that duo work? Pretty simple. Le Pen runs for president, and if she wins, Bardella becomes prime minister. One brings the experience and the loyal base, the other brings the fresh face and the youth vote. Two for the price of one. But here's the catch, because yes, all of this sounds great, but at the end of the day, there can only be one president, and in France, winning the Élysée isn't even enough to actually govern. Even if Le Pen wins the presidency, if she doesn't control parliament, her hands will be tied. She won't be able to pass her laws or carry out her platform. Nothing. So what is the plan then? Well, it's one of the most ambitious ones out there. The idea would be to win the presidency first, and immediately after, take parliament too. And can you actually pull off both nearly at once? Yes. In fact, it already happened not that long ago.
In 2017, Emmanuel Macron won the presidential election with La République En Marche, a party founded barely a year earlier. 5 weeks later, legislative elections were held, and that same party swept them, winning an absolute majority in the National Assembly. Within months, Macron controlled both the presidency and parliament.
But notice the key detail. In 2017, the presidential and legislative elections were back to back, one right after the other. Macron won the first, and rode the wave to sweep the second, without having to force anything. Well, that's exactly what Le Pen is after. Except she'd have to pull it off differently, because today that calendar is broken. Legislative elections are no longer tied to the presidential ones, so Le Pen would have to trigger them herself by dissolving the assembly. And that's where the danger lies, because dissolving parliament is a gamble that can easily blow up in your face. Don't believe it? Just ask Macron.
In June 2024, after losing the European elections, Macron dissolved the assembly and called snap elections. The result was a parliament split into 3 rival blocs with no majority for anyone. The left-wing New Popular Front as the top force, Macron's bloc in second, and the Rassemblement National third, despite having won the most votes overall.
Look at what happened there. National Rally won the popular vote and ended up third in seats. Why? The Republican Front. Again. The left and the centre joined forces to block their path. So that wall we said was cracking held up in 2024 after all. And that Republican Front works thanks to one key mechanism, the 2-round voting system. Because legislative elections are voted on similarly to the presidential ones. 2 rounds, but district by district. And naturally, whenever a candidate from Le Pen's party sneaks into that second round, the other parties unite against them and strip away, district by district, the seats they'd otherwise be entitled to based on their vote share. Look at the crash of 2024. After the first round, some projections had National Rally winning over 240 seats. It looked like power was within their grasp. But then, the second round hit. The Republican Front kicked in, and they ended up with barely 142. That's how brutal the effect is. And heads up, even if new elections were called tomorrow, the picture wouldn't change all that much. National Rally would almost certainly be the most voted party again. But going from that to having a real governing majority is a whole different story. Tory, they'd fall way short. And without that majority, no matter how much you win at the ballot box, you can't do much of anything. So if they can't get it on their own, there's only one way out: strike deals. Find allies willing to lend them the seats they are missing. The problem? This party is pretty much alone in parliament. Almost everyone else shares the same red line: no governing with and no deals with the far right. The only real ally is Eric Ciotti's UDR, a splinter of the traditional right that broke ranks to align with them in 2024. But they're just a handful of lawmakers, not enough to move the needle. The official Republicans maintain their veto, and Macron's bloc and the entire left? Forget it. So no matter how you add it up, the numbers never reach 289. That's why Bardella himself has said it plainly. He'll only sit in Matignon, the Prime Minister's seat, if he has an absolute majority. He knows that, without one, there are no partners to build it with, and he'd end up trapped in the government paralysed from day one. Macron knows this all too well. Since the 2024 dissolution, he's burned through 3 prime ministers: Barnier, Bayrou, and Lecornu. One of them lasted 26 days. That's how ungovernable the assembly is right now. So the most likely scenario the polls are painting today isn't a national rally governing freely. It's a fractured assembly with no clear majority. Le Pen's party as the top force, sure, but unable to govern, facing a left and centre it'll find impossible to work with. Exactly the kind of paralysis France has been stuck in since 2024. That said, nobody should celebrate too soon. The wall isn't eternal. If National Rally keeps growing and the Republican front keeps wearing thin, with more and more right-leaning voters refusing to respect it, the picture could change. And with Bardella leading the legislative push, that scenario looks a bit more possible. But at least for now, it still looks far off. And even in the hypothetical case that they did land that majority, it wouldn't be smooth sailing either. Why? Because let's not forget, Le Pen and Bardella are 2 very different profiles, and every policy they'd try to push through could run into pushback from one or the other. Who knows how far that tug-of-war could go? It could end in internal friction, or even a full-blown clash. And again, let's not forget, there's only room for one president. But let's pause for a second, because this whole time, we've been assuming Le Pen wins the presidential election, and that is far from certain. The polls are razor tight. And if Le Pen doesn't win, the blow to the party could be massive. Which brings us back to one of our opening questions. Will Bardella end up stealing the throne from her? Because if Le Pen stumbles, internal conflict is pretty much guaranteed. And it's not at all clear the leader would survive it this time. At the end of the day, Bardella looks like by far the better candidate. And yes, I know I've said it already, but it bears repeating. We're talking about politics here. A defeat spiraling into internal warfare wouldn't be anything new for this party. It's happened before. Remember Florian Philpott, the guy we mentioned at the start?
In 2017, Marine Le Pen had just lost the runoff to Emmanuel Macron, following a televised debate widely seen as a disaster for her. Shortly after, the party plunged into crisis. Florian Philippot, the party's number 2 and chief strategist, clashed with Le Pen over the direction the party should take. The standoff dragged on for weeks and ended with Philippot's exit. He founded his own party, which barely got off the ground, while Le Pen tightened her grip on the National Front.
There's a pattern right there. First the defeat, then right after, out come the knives. That's exactly why 2027 has analysts so on edge. Because deep down, running Le Pen is a desperate gamble, one made by a woman who's putting her own name and her place in history ahead of the party's real chances of winning. And if that gamble fails, National Rally could blow apart. But to understand why, you have to start with a simple idea. In this party, loyalty to Le Pen comes with a condition. She's tolerated as long as she smells like a winner. And that's exactly the problem, because Le Pen has spent over a decade losing. 3 runs, not a single win. But of course, she's relatively young, not yet 60, and has no intention of stepping aside. So the question looming over the party is as simple as it is uncomfortable. How many more defeats is her own base willing to swallow? For now, nobody's making a move, because she's seen as the favourite. But that calm rests on a single pillar, the hope of winning. And if that pillar collapses, everything else goes down with it. And what could bring it down? Well, beyond everything we've already covered, the legal case itself. One that strikes directly at what was always her greatest asset, honesty. Because let's not forget, she's been convicted of embezzling public funds. Her entire career was built on calling out the corrupt establishment and presenting herself as the clean politician. And this conviction rips that mask off in one go. Her defense is that yes, there were irregularities, but unintentional ones that, well, they didn't know. Which, being generous, is basically admitting she mismanaged public money. And up against a rival like Edouard Philippe, the competent former centrist prime minister with no scandals to his name, that baggage weighs like a millstone. To be fair, the legal case could also work in her favour. Le Pen knows how to sell herself as the victim of a system trying to get rid of her, reinforcing the outsider image that's always paid off for her. But almost certainly, it's going to cost her far more than it gains her. And here's the crux of it. It makes her a much easier target to beat than Bardella would have been. In other words, the party has bet on the weaker horse. And VisualPolitik community, that's the spark that could set the whole thing on fire. Because the winning horse, Bardella, is precisely the one they've sidelined. A guy who'd spent months dressing like a president, magazine covers, an image polished to perfection, dinners with wealthy elites to build up his respectability. He could already see himself in the Élysée, and suddenly, he's handed a consolation prize. Do you really think he's going to take that well? His frustration, which must be enormous, could come out in all sorts of ways. From open criticism to something quieter and more lethal, dragging his feet throughout the campaign for a candidate who took his spot. So put it all together, and you've got a powder keg, and not just within the party, but across all of France. Because however you look at it, the picture isn't exactly encouraging. France is dragging around some very serious underlying problems. A limping economy, soaring debt, and a society that keeps fracturing further. And on top of all that, a political system that seems incapable of fixing any of it. Think about it for a second. If Le Pen wins, we've already seen it. She'd slam straight into a wall of ungovernability, with no majority to push through anything she's promised. And if anyone else wins, a centrist, the left, whoever, chances are they'll end up in the same dead end as Macron. A shattered assembly, governments collapsing every few months, and a country stuck in a rut. So in the end, the question isn't just who wins anymore, it's whether anyone, whoever it turns out to be, will actually be able to govern. France needs someone who can break the deadlock, pull off that near impossible majority, and bring some stability back to the country. And that's where a lot of eyes keep turning. Once again, to the same place, Jordan Bardella. Will he be the one to finally pull France out of the gridlock? Or will he end up, like so many heirs apparent before him, stranded on the shore? Leave us your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, you know the drill, hit like and subscribe. And if you want to understand what's really happening in the markets and learn how to manage your money with more confidence, well, join the Visual Factory Club. It's completely free and the link's in the description. Take care. I'll see you in the next one.